Vekni and Sorin decided to travel to Vigor Valley City in order to complete one of the tasks Lady Arose asked of them. Lady Arose had given the adventurers a ring and asked them to find the blacksmith, Tiger Keg, and to have him craft a tiara using the ring's setting. Before leaving the city, Vekni and Sorin spoke with Boomadon and Lady Arose in the Queen's Grace courtyard. Curious about the relations between a fairy and a Goliath, the adventurers learned the love shared between Arose and Boomadon was not physical. Sorin and Vekni traveled 3 days west in the direction of Vigor Valley City. The party observed smoke in the distance towards the direction of the destroyed Serv's Tavern. Sorin and Vekni decided to investigate the origin of the smoke. As they neared the smoke, they observed a flying, flaming steed, ridden by an armored half-orc wearing red and orange colors. A large axe was strapped to his back. The flaming steed was heading roughly in their direction. Thinking quickly, Sorin casted Minor Illusion to make it appear as though he and Vekni had a translucent magic barrier protecting them. The rider flew by, glared at the pair, then continued on his way past them. The party continued towards the smoke, where they encountered the aftermath of a battle. Wagons and one sigils were burning near the remnants of Serv's Tavern, and dead men hung from nooses. There were dead One soldiers laying on the ground as well, mixed in with some dead Forte soldiers. A man wearing splendid red armor and a red great helm, with 2 long horns and the design of a demon head as a visor, stood near a half-dozen living Forte soldiers. Sorin and Vekni spoke with a splendidly armored man, who they learned was named Karagonda, one of the 2 leaders of Forte, who ruled with another man named Frank Mandrid. They deceived Karagonda after presenting him with the letter of passage they received from one of Frank Mandrid's subordinates in Serv's Tavern a month prior. Vekni claimed she and Sorin just wanted to visit the large tavern in Vigor Valley City, because, as Sorin put it, the 2 of them were connoisseurs of fine drink. Sorin and Vekni put on a show for Karagonda's men, partying and drinking with them near the fallen soldiers, destroyed wagons, burnt sigils, and obliterated tavern. Afterwards, Karagonda permitted the duo to go, but he warned Vekni that if he found out they lied to him, they would meet a most horrible fate, worse than death. A shiver ran down Vekni's spine at Karagonda's ominous words. Karagonda also instructed Vekni to find Lorgan in the Vigor Valley City Tavern, and to tell him they were sent by Karagonda. He explained Lorgan would set them up nicely. The adventurers continued on their journey and entered through the gates of Vigor Valley City. They observed many Vigor banners and credos as they traversed the town. The party made their way through the Valley Shopping Center and entered the blacksmith. Inside, Sorin spoke with Tiger Keg, the blacksmith Lady Arose sent him to find. Sorin asked Tiger Keg to use the setting of the ring Arose gave him to make a tiara. Tiger Keg was confused at this request, as he was not experienced at working with jewelry. Sorin casted suggestion on Tiger Keg, getting him to agree to do the job and to stop asking questions. Before leaving the shop, Vekni looked over Tiger Keg's wares. She was surprised to find most weapons in the smithy were shoddily made and of poor quality. Vekni and Sorin left the blacksmith and made haste towards Lorgan's tavern. Upon entering, they found an enormous tavern. There were bounties posted behind the bar, and the adventurers noticed a multitude of tables filled with people. Each table seemed isolated from the other tables, and the patrons at each table had distinct battle standards, sigils, and colors representing various factions. Honesty was in the back of the tavern, playing music on a stage. Inside Lorgan's tavern, Vekni recognized Tadazanki sitting in the bar with 2 other One soldiers. She approached him and introduced the Highlander to Sorin. Tadazaki introduced one of his allies and a fellow Highlander, Kristoff Pearl, to Sorin and Vekni. Despite his barbarian-like looks, Kristoff appeared to be quite intelligent. Vekni and Sorin spoke in length to Lorgan, the bartender and owner of Lorgan's Tavern. He made it known that he despises Karaganda and Vigor, but that Vigor permits him to do business in Vigor Valley City. Lorgan told the pair the city was in quarantine due to an attack on Karaganda's troops 1 month prior. Lorgan continued to explain some of the rules for his bar. No fighting. You can bring your war horses into the bar, but you must clean up after the beasts and shovel their shit yourself. Vekni and Sorin learned from Lorgan that the armorer's son works for the city and would have knowledge of the sewer system. He also mentioned that a man who claimed to have traveled from the past came to Vigor Valley City 3 years ago, and Frank Mandred found this man to be good at making armor. He will be found inside the armorer's shop as well. Lorgan later expressed a hatred and disgust for Blackwing, one of the men of Chaos, also present in the tavern. The party learned Frank Mandred, one of the leaders of Forte, had a laboratory in the Forte barracks, where he was using queer materials to make weapons and armor, and that he was also working on creating a special potion of some kind. Lorgan spoke of how most of the patrons in Lorgan's Tavern were somewhat trapped there for about a month, due to the martial law in the city. Next, Vekni and Sorin stopped by the table of sleigh soldiers. They met a high elf mage trained by Lord Camembert, Idlewild. They met an ebony knight who had a hatred and disgust for Blackwing, Sir Adonis. And they met a human swordsman with a glowing sword, Phoenix. The sleigh group and the adventurers got acquainted. Sorin convinced Idlewild he was friendly with Lord Camembert by showing him the scroll of fireball that he received from Camembert's image in the School of Magic. The group from Slay explained they traveled to Vigor Valley City to find a way to open the path into King Lorien's Valley so they could set up an outpost closer to the capital, thereby giving them a staging place for their invasion. The specific place they were eyeing at traveling to was called Sang Citadel. Vekni and Sorin were able to convince the Slay men to become acquainted with Tadazaki and the others of One. Next, the adventurers spoke with Sir Trentum and Blackwing of Chaos. Sorin tried to act cocky, thinking it would impress the men of Chaos, but Blackwing was standoffish and insulting to both Sorin and his companion. Vekni mentioned she knew Rothschild, and that he was incarcerated in the Queen's Grace dungeons, but she neglected to speak of his demise. Sir Trentum formally introduced himself to Sorin and Vekni as the Knight of Peaches. The Peach Knight apologized for Blackwing's poor demeanor. Vekni advised Trent that Rothschild must have failed his mission at Whittle Falls. The Knight of Peaches explained Hainsworth commanded Rothschild to blow the entrance to a cave behind the falls, where a threat lurked that could end the world. He explained he and Blackwing snuck into Frank Mandred's laboratory and stole the dynamite for Rothschild's mission, but now they would have to get more dynamite. Trent asked Vekni to collapse the cave for Chaos and Lord Hainsworth. While speaking further with Trent, he revealed the reason Hainsworth killed Queen Inez's sister, Shalsis, was to steal her earrings, the Tears of Dovah. Apparently, Hainsworth desired these earrings very badly. Vekni and Sorin convinced Slay, One, and Chaos to work together to kill Frank Mandred and escape the city, despite the enmity between Chaos and Slay. As the groups got to know each other, Blackwing hurled insult after insult at the other alliances, and the adventurers as well. He was generally a douchebag with every word he spoke to everyone in the tavern, even his ally Sir Trentum. Despite this, Blackwing had nothing but praise when speaking of his leader, Lord Hainsworth. Blackwing said he believed Hainsworth was destined to save the material plane from a coming calamity. He explained Hainsworth would need to become King of Dovah first for the world to be saved. The adventurers met Gragas Stormbringer in the tavern. He was a former member of the Order of the Burning Fist. Sorin greeted Gragas with respect and admiration, remembering the tales he heard of the Burning Fist from his father, King Dokkan Swiftwater of Ferelden. Gragas told the story of how he and his allies got sucked into a black hole after defeating the vampire Vlad, son of the devil, in Ferelden 25 years ago. Gragas continued that he suddenly awoke in Dovah a few years back. Shortly after that, he joined a mercenary company called the Silver Swords, and then later became the commander of their 2nd Legion. Gragas spoke of how he missed his old friends. He explained he was in love with a former member of the Burning Fist, a young human witch, Marigold Mandred. Gragas heard she was alive and in Dovah. He asked the party to find her and to tell her of his feelings. Gragas said he would join in a new adventure once he had her answer. He explained he heard Marigold had a brother who worked in Vigor Valley City as a researcher. Gragas said he had not been able to work up the courage to seek out this brother, so he asked the adventurers to speak to him on Gragas' behalf. Marigold's brother's name was Frank Mandred. Sorin agreed to help Gragas. Sorin and Gragas shared some old stories about King Dokkan, enjoying themselves and building a rapport. Next, Sorin and Vekni went over to the table of men from Lions. They spoke with Wundrin, a former member of the Burning Fist and current member of the faction called Lions. He appeared to be under the influence of a leafy green substance he smoked in front of them. Wundrin explained that despite Lions' alliance with Forte, Karaganda has been bullying their group. Since Lord Leonidas allowed the One Army to pass through Pridecutter Keep, Leonidas has been very concerned Karaganda might harm them. Wundrin and his group came to Vigor Valley City to petition Frank Mandred and Mayor Shroud to have Karaganda lay off them. Wundrin said their efforts had failed so far and asked the party to assist them. Sorin deceived Wundrin into signing Lord Winnegar's ally ledger, but as he was about to sign it, he was interrupted by a man of lions with battle talons strapped to his sword belt. The man, who was later revealed to be called Striking Owl, with a given name of Morio, stated he was put in charge of this group. He scribbled a crude map of King Lorien's Valley, with the location labeled as DSHQ circled on it. He asked Vekni and Sorin to deliver this map to Lord Weald, in exchange for Wundrin's signature. Later, Sorin and Vekni spoke with 2 lizardmen of Frank. One was larger and armored, while the other was smaller and unarmored with daggers on his sword belt. The larger one stated the lizard folk should rule Dovah, but Snorian, their leader, lacked the ambition and will to do so. The lizard folk said they came to the city to kill Frank Mandred and rescue Snorian's wife, Lady Epona, from the Forte barracks. The smaller lizard folk gave the adventurers a dagger with the design of a black bird surrounded by orange flames on the hilt. He asked them to plunge the dagger into one of the Forte soldiers and leave it there after killing him, to frame Blackwing for the murder. Sorin and Vekni blackmailed the lizardmen with their own plot. The lizardmen agreed to work with Slay, One, and Chaos to kill Frank Mandred. Vekni noticed the black man from Queensgrace was in the bar, and she approached him. He did not seem interested in a friendly conversation, so she wished him a good day and went to speak with someone else. Next, Vekni and Sorin spoke with the man in purple armor, sitting by himself. She learned his name was Vittori, and he was following his son, Morio, around, who was not aware he was there. Vittori explained he had attacked Morio's leader, the Master, and he did not believe his son would forgive him. Vittori spoke of how he brought Morio to the Master as a young boy, who then trained and indoctrinated him. He explained the Master and his friends aimed to control Cortania, the material plane that they are all on. During her conversation with Vittori, Vekni revealed that just like Vittori, she also lost a son. Sorin was unaware of this part of his companion's past and his interest was piqued, but Vekni was evasive when asked to elaborate. She left Vittori's table and returned to the table of lions. Vekni spoke with Morio once again, revealing she knew his true name and who he really served. Morio disclosed the Master and his fellow Order members dispatched agents all over Cortania to influence the state of the world. He explained that was his purpose here in Dovah, and his purpose in service of lions. Morio said a person called Maki betrayed the order that the Master belonged to. He was sent to Dovah to guide the powers that be into ensuring Maki falls. Vekni and Sorin spoke with Morio at length about bonds, blood, and duty. Sorin eventually casted suggestion on Morio, successfully forcing him to try and make amends with his father, Vittori. Vekni brought Morio over to Vittori's table, reuniting them and beginning the process of healing old wounds. As the night came to an end, Honesty began to perform one of his ballads, a song about a drow attack and deception. Vekni and Sorin continued to speak with patrons at Lorgan's Tavern. They met a group from the faction Blues, one of the branches of Vigor formed by those formerly loyal to the late King Lorien. The party of Blues consisted of Mrs. T, a beautiful human woman with blonde hair, blue eyes, a speech impediment, and a glowing sword. There was a great sadness in her eyes. Both her husband and her former lord died fighting Vigor during the Conquest. She said that the Fury Lord called Maki gifted her the flaming sword that she carried on her sword belt. Sir Arelyn, a friendly knight in service of Blues. He seemed to have great pride in his faction and his former king. Arelyn mentioned the great lords of Blues, Lord Bolts, Lady Unceros, Lord Dilly, and Lord Rickmond. Orca, Sir Arelyn's warhorse, and Emmanuel, a hulking, barbarian-looking man with blue and black armor. He mostly spoke in grunts and carried 2 small axes on his sword belt. Sorin and Vekni impressed Mrs. T with their magical abilities. Kind of. After speaking with the group in length, Sir Arelyn revealed he and many in Blues despised Vigor, and many of his allies would like to see the rule of the Vigor Lords overturned. Vekni asked where the Blues' stronghold was, and Arelyn stated there were no cities under Blues' control in the Fringe region, but that in King Lorien's Valley, Blues controlled many cities and castles, such as Castle Blood, Blue Bolt, Raven's Perch, and Sang Citadel. When pressed by Vekni on why Blues followed Vigor, Sir Arelyn stated Vigor defeated the great lords of the valley in the war 10 years ago. He explained many of the former lords were executed, and some nobles were still being kept as hostages. Vekni asked about Blues allying with those that opposed Vigor. Arelyn spat at the thought of allying with the foreign invaders of Un, but was more open to joining forces with Queensgrace, or possibly the hiding Prince Lorien. Sorin asked Arelyn who the Fury Lords were. He explained the Fury Lords were as follows. Odoacer, a foreigner and a half-orc. He was very strong and wielded dark magic that he supposedly obtained from his orcish god. Odoacer possessed a pink gauntlet that could control gravity itself. Bjorn Skytaker, a human swordsman with a terrible scar on his face. He was said to be one of the best swordsmen in the world. Vekni surmised that Bjorn was Prince's father. Maki, a halfling possessing of great power. It was said that he gave Odoacer his gauntlet, as well as Mrs. T her flaming sword. After explaining the political landscape and the state of the foreign invasion, Vekni and Sorin convinced Sir Arelyn and his team that the time to strike Vigor was nigh. He agreed to help in any way that the pair asked. Sir Arelyn mentioned the best options for allies within Blue's leadership would be Lord Rickmond and Lady Unceros. Arelyn stated he and Rickmond had conversations about their shared dislike of Vigor, while Lady Unceros' father was executed by Vigor during the war. Sir Arelyn described how the former hand of the king, Lord Henry, escaped Loriston during the sack of the city 10 years ago, and has been working behind the scenes to overthrow Vigor and appoint Prince Lorien as King of Dovah. He said Lord Henry was recently arrested and was currently being held in the Vigor Valley City jail. Arlen believed Henry was building an army, which was hiding somewhere in Vigor Valley City. The faction that he formed was called Clad, and the posters that the PCs saw being torn down by soldiers outside, the poster of the Golden Crown on a light blue background, represented the sigil of this faction. Sir Arlen admitted he was homosexual and found Sorin attractive. He made a pass at Sorin, and Sorin responded by being non-committal, but Arlen was motivated to win over Sorin's heart. Arlen made a semi-proclamation that he would win over Sorin through success on the battlefield. Before departing, Emmanuel gave Vekni a cloak embroidered with the blue rose sigil of blues. Arlen gave Sorin a pair of steel leg shackles as a parting gift as well. He explained he often used them on prisoners while he was in service at Vigor, but he no longer would need them. The group of blues warriors left the bar, immediately heading out to follow Sorin's request. Next, Vekni and Sorin visited the table of Forte Tieflings to do a little gambling. Vekni and Sorin were successful in their many games of roulette, figuring out an exploit for guaranteed money. They also became acquainted with a tiefling in bright orange armor, Nicholas, captain of the Forte assassination squad. As Nicholas put it, when the government wants people dead, he makes them dead. Nicholas mentioned he currently had a mission to assassinate Queen Inez of Queensgrace, as well as a mission to find Prince Lorien and Clad in the Vigor Valley City sewers. He explained he intended to travel to the sewers to kill the men of Clad on the morrow. Vekni offered to assist Nicholas in killing Prince Lorien's men. Nicholas said he would meet her at noon on the following day to accomplish this, and offered 10% of Lorien's bounty if they were to succeed. Nicholas warned Vekni the sewers were overrun with beasts and quite dangerous, as the sewer workers normally had an armed escort to do their work. Vekni and Sorin retired upstairs to sleep for the night. Before sleeping, Sorin casted Find Familiar, summoning a jet black owl with fine feathers, wearing golden shackles on its legs. As an elf, Vekni only needed 4 hours of rest. So, after 4 hours, she started to head back downstairs when her rest was completed. She was met in the stairwell by Blackwing, who advised her Sir Trentham, Slay, and One set fires in the residential area to draw the Forte soldiers out of the barracks. He explained Sorin and Vekni would have about 25 minutes before the Forte soldiers began to return after controlling the fires. Blackwing agreed to escort Vekni and Sorin at Vekni's request, but stated he would not enter the Forte barracks to aid them. Vekni rushed upstairs to wake Sorin, and as she awoke him, both PCs could hear the thunderous sound of an army marching through the city. When Vekni and Sorin returned downstairs, Blackwing was nowhere to be seen. Vekni threw on the blues cloak that she received from Emmanuel, while Sorin casted Minor Illusion to make it appear as though he was wearing a Vigor cloak, and both adventurers left Lorgan's Tavern, venturing into the city. Vekni and Sorin observed many Forte soldiers hurriedly heading in the direction of the fire. The soldiers were unorganized and many were dressed sloppily. Vekni and Sorin reached the barracks and entered, where they found a small number of soldiers still changing and getting ready inside. The party searched some of the footlockers in front of unoccupied bunks, finding old uniforms. Sorin also obtained an item in one of the lockers, an arrow-catching shield. The pair walked through the building to the back, where they observed an oddly out-of-place metallic-looking door. Vekni pulled on the handle and heard the sound of steam releasing as the door opened. The party stepped into a brightly lit room. The walls and floors of the room were white, and there were catwalks extending out above this strange orange liquid contained in a giant pool that spanned the entire room. Metallic battle suits of some kind were kept behind glass windows, and pure white bookcases and desks were contained within the room. Important-looking notes and books were laying on some of the desks. Sorin used his familiar to explore the room. On the far side of the lab, he observed a human researcher scribbling furiously in a notebook, while a female lizard folk rubbed his shoulders and whispered to him in Draconic. The lizard folk's skin oozed with pus and was covered in warts. She had short hair, exposing a sweaty, pox-ridden scalp. Her face and snout were oddly flat and misshapen for a lizard folk. She was fat. Her teeth were green-yellow and rotting. The party would soon learn that this pair were Frank Mandred, one of the Forte leaders, and Lady Epona, Snorian's wife, who was supposedly kidnapped from the village of Afrai. Sorin and Vekni snuck up on the pair while whispering to each other whether or not they would immediately assassinate Frank. They decided to speak with him first, and Sorin approached to introduce himself. Sorin asked Frank if he knew Marigold Mandred, the woman Gragas sought after. Frank confirmed Marigold was his sister. Frank offered to give the party information about Marigold if they tested some weapons for him. He gave the pair 2 prototype weapons to use in battle, so they can gather data for him. Vekni asked what Frank's purpose was with his research, and he explained Forte was the weakest branch of Vigor, but he planned to change that. He was working on new weapons, battle armor, and a super soldier serum that could put Forte on top over the other branches. Vekni asked about Epona, and Frank explained the two once lived in the Lizardman village of Afrai, where Epona was married to their leader and chieftain, Snorian. Frank detailed how he and Epona shared a single night of drunken passion, and Epona became smitten with him. Frank said he left the village, and Epona followed him there. Sorin casted suggestion on Frank, convincing him to disclose what he knew about Marigold, before he and Vekni tested out the prototype weapons. Frank said for the past year, he heard rumors King Dokkan Swiftwater of Ferelden was seen frequenting Epona's bog. If true, perhaps he had been visiting Marigold there, as she preferred places like bogs and swamps and was a friend of Dokkan's in the past. Vekni handed one of the prototype weapons back to Frank, asking him how it worked. He went into a detailed explanation, but as he was holding the weapon, Vekni attacked him by surprise with a punch to the face. Vekni unleashed an onslaught of punches at Frank, some hitting, some missing, and afterwards, he did not appear to be particularly hurt. Next, Sorin casted Cause Fear on Frank, successfully affecting him and causing him to be afraid of mental images of Sorin's owl familiar. Frank deftly pulled a prototype blaster weapon out of his pocket and aimed it at Sorin. He fired once, striking Sorin, causing considerable damage to the young human mage. Frank fired a second time, but the weapon slipped from his hand and landed in the pool of serum below. Next, Vekni continued the attack on Frank. She slashed him with her sword, then she tried to kick him. Her kick missed, but she followed up with a knee to Frank's face. The knee landed, and Vekni infused her ki into the blow, nailing Frank with stunning strike, leaving him temporarily stunned. With Frank afraid, stunned, and backed up on a ledge above the pool of serum, Sorin casted Mold Earth, making the marble tile Frank stood upon into a diagonal slide. Frank slid down the slide with absolutely no control over his body and splashed into the mysterious orange liquid below. Lady Epona screamed in anguish at the sight of her beloved Frank falling to his death. Epona was completely freaking out and demanding the adventurers rescue Frank from the liquid. She said that everyone who consumed the liquid died in a few days, but usually they would become much stronger prior to their death. Sorin casted suggestion on Epona, convincing her to leave the laboratory with he and Vekni. As the trio left the lab, Sorin grabbed some of the research papers and books that looked important. Vekni lit many of her dynamite sticks, then hurled them throughout the lab. Some were thrown into the serum, others were thrown onto the research papers, and others were hurled into separate corners and areas of the facility. Moments after they left the lab, explosions rocked the Forte barracks. Before going outside, Sorin casted minor illusion on Epona to make her appear to be a green dragonborn in an attempt to conceal her from Forte troops. The group ventured back into the city. On their way back to Lorgan's tavern, a Forte soldier stopped the group and questioned them. Sorin made up a tale about catching the dragonborn beating off in an alley and being dangerous. Sorin then casted Cause Fear on the soldier, but failed to affect him with the spell. Derek, the Forte soldier, became extremely suspicious while speaking with the group. Sorin eventually bribed him with 300 gold in order to get by. Derek had also mentioned that his cousin was an anointed knight in the city named Sir Deej. The party made it back and spoke again with Gragas Stormbringer. Sorin and Vekni explained that they learned Marigold might be in Epona's bog, and asked Gragas to escort Epona back there to her husband Snorian. Epona was reluctant to go back to Snorian, and was still fretting over Frank Mandred. But Sorin had a chance to read some of the paperwork from Frank's lab. Realizing Epona had a son who lived back towards the bog, Sorin used that as leverage to convince Epona to return. Gragas and Epona departed together, heading towards the bog. Sorin and Vekni rested after their adventure in the Forte barracks, hoping to recoup some of their strength, before they joined Nicholas and the Forte assassination squad in exploring the Vigor Valley City sewers in the afternoon. Vekni awoke in Lorgan's tavern after a brief rest. She got some breakfast and spoke at length with Lorgan. Lorgan complimented Vekni on her alliance building, calling it masterful. He asked if she belonged to a faction or had a sigil. She stated she served the Golden Tusk pirate fleet on the sea, but served no faction in Dovah. Vekni talked a bit about the group she became separated from. She spoke of the twin goblins and her 2 boys. When she spoke of Prince, Lorgan told her some bad news. A young pirate wearing a red coat and wielding a giant greatsword attacked a group of pirates in Epona's bog. The pirates captured the young man, who Lorgan believed sounded much like Vekni's friend. Lorgan also advised Vekni he heard someone at Dankar's Fine Dining wanted to speak with she and Sorin. While speaking with Lorgan, Vekni learned more about blues. Lorgan explained the people of Dovah respected the rule and authority of the old knights and lords from the Lorien dynasty. To keep them loyal to Vigor leadership, the Fury Lords kept relatives of some of the old rulers hostage, while Maki gifted others powerful magic weapons. Lorgan and Vekni spoke about chaos. They discussed the zealous devotion Hainsworth's men had to him, considering him a messiah of sorts. Later, Vekni traveled to the armorer shop and met Trifle, the shopkeeper. He agreed to line Vekni's backpack to make it resistant to combustion and fire. Trifle explained Iridact, a dwarf who was off that day, makes weapons for the shop. He continued to show Vekni weapons and armor that were superior to anything Vekni had seen in the shop up until this point in the adventure. When Vekni was about to leave the armorer shop, she realized a man working at the anvil in the back of the room was her old flame, Miclean Greystone. Miclean appeared to be a young man in his prime, but he passed away from old age in 6335, 46 years ago. Miclean was the father of Vekni's son, who she never had a chance to get to know. Kevlian Greystone, first ranger of Slay, the half-elf without a nose. Order of the Burning Fist member and hero of Thaddeus. Vekni realized this man was actually her long-lost little boy. Vekni disclosed to Mictlian she changed her name and appearance. She dyed her hair, got a tan, spoke with an accent, and now went by the name of Vekni Avumque. She was no longer the high elf noblewoman from Coldbank, Marjorie Sharpeye. Vekni explained the Queen of Harganeth, Marathi, committed genocide on the High Elves of Coldbank, then burned the city to the ground 26 years ago. Marathi learned of Marjorie's existence and has put an enormous bounty on her head. So Vekni took to the seas with Captain Goldentusk and his fleet of pirate ships to evade capture. Vekni learned Mictlian was a slave to Tryfol the Armorer, ever since Mictlian's great skill at metalworking and blacksmithing was recognized by Frank Mandrit. Vekni told Mictlian she would free him on the following day. Mictlian was happy to be reunited with his lost love, but asked she refrained from killing Tryfol, as his master was a good man. Vekni did not commit to spare Tryfol. Vekni began to walk back to Lorgan's Tavern. Meanwhile, Sorin awoke, and after some morning preparations, he walked downstairs to the bar area of Lorgan's Tavern. Sorin approached a table filled with individuals wearing blood mist colors and sigils. The table consisted of a small group of orcs and a human wearing black and red armor and the attire of a knight. The human, Sir Galloway, told Sorin his group once served blood mist, but no longer did. Galloway explained blood mist sold children and did all sorts of bad things, so he left them. He continued saying the orcs were his posse and would follow him wherever he chose to go, and he was currently looking for a better liege to serve under. Sorin told Galloway that he had met Lord Craven previously, and Galloway was surprised Sorin survived meeting the Blood Mist leader. Sorin stated he liked to make friends in low places. Sir Galloway told the story of how he was in the Vigor Valley sewers and saw a man he recognized from wanted posters. Galloway said he captured the man, who turned out to be a wanted rebel of great importance, Lord Henry, the former Hand of the King. Galloway explained after turning in Henry, he was anointed as a knight. Galloway said when he turned in the bounty, he met a woman. He explained her name was Rochambeau, and she was the mayor's bodyguard. He stated that he believed Ro was checking him out. He added maybe he would join Forte so he could be with her. Sorin congratulated Galloway for becoming a knight, making money, and meeting a woman he liked. Galloway was very excited to be a Sir and talked with pride about how he now had to come up with a sigil and would have the opportunity to have descendants carry on the name of his new house. Galloway asked Sorin to serve under him, but Sorin declined and deflected by giving Galloway advice on how to expand the power of his newly formed house. Galloway admitted he was new to politics and listened intently to Sorin's advice. Sorin educated Sir Galloway as to the current state of leadership in the ranks of Forte, and suggested he go see the mayor. Sir Galloway gave Sorin some information about another knight in the city, Sir Deege. He explained Deege was dating the woman Galloway liked, Rochambeau. Galloway said ever since he captured Henry in the sewers, Sir Deege had been combing the sewers every day, trying to one-up Galloway and find other wanted men. Galloway asked Sorin if he could find Deege and kill him to eliminate his competition for Rochambeau's heart, so he could have her to himself. Galloway offered some coin in exchange for Deege's death. Sorin agreed to kill Sir Deege for no charge, aside from a future alliance between Ferelden and Galloway's new house. Vekni met back up with Sorin in the tavern. She told him of how she found her long-dead love, Mictlian Greystone. Upon hearing Mictlian once served the Order of the Burning Fist, Sorin became quite interested in the man. Next, Sorin and Vekni traveled to Dankar's Fine Dining to speak with the mysterious person who wanted to meet with them. Upon arrival, a fancily dressed host in a tuxedo met the two adventurers at the door. He was difficult about allowing Vekni into the restaurant due to her attire. Vekni attempted to bribe the man with 10 gold. He accepted the gold, but then still refused to allow her inside, insisting she purchase finer attire at Fancy Frank's. Sorin casted Minor Illusion on Vekni as she spun 360 degrees, transforming her outfit into a beautiful green gown. After another 5 gold tip to the host, he seated Sorin and Vekni towards the back of the restaurant. Vekni asked the host to fetch Dankar, and he held out his hand for another tip. Vekni tipped him 2 gold. The host stated he would get her, but he wasn't sure how busy she would be. Vekni sighed and tipped him another 3 gold. He agreed to bring Dankar over to Vekni and Sorin. After ordering white wine and some appetizers, the PCs were approached by Dankar. Dankar was an older blonde human woman, approximately 50 years old. She was probably quite good looking when she was younger. Dankar directed the waiter to bring Sorin and Vekni glasses of champagne, courtesy of 3 noble-looking ladies at another table. Dankar directed the adventurers to go to the table as the woman wanted to speak with them. The party walked to the 3 ladies and met them. One was a young, blonde, teenage girl wearing a gold and red dress. She was the daughter of deposed King Lorien, Princess Tyraz. Another was the most beautiful woman either PC had ever seen. A dark-haired woman in a blue dress with a blue veil in her hair. She was very flirty, batted her eyes, and pursed her lips. She was Lady Lothston of Furia. The last woman was quite ugly. She was a blonde in a blue dress, with a big nose. She was slightly chubby and middle-aged. One of her eyes was askew. She was also quite crass in her speech. This woman said that she was the wife of Lord Dilly of Blues. Her name was Lady Waller. Sorin took Lady Lothston's hand and kissed it during introductions. Princess Tyraz also held out her hand to Sorin. During the handshake, she slipped a crumpled note to Sorin. Vekni asked the 3 ladies why they were invited to Dankar's and how they knew who she and Sorin were, but the 3 women looked confused. Lady Waller asked Vekni what the fuck she was talking about. Vekni started to doubt that anyone from this group of women invited them to Dankar's. During their conversation with the women, Lady Lothston divulged she was of Furia and served directly under the Fury Lords. She was very flirty and acting quite demure with Sorin. He did not show Lothston the attention she desired, and she grew frustrated Sorin was not acting as though he was attracted to her. Lady Lothston explained to the PCs that Princess Tyraz was raised by Vigor since she was a young girl and was a loyal vassal of the rightful rulers of the kingdom. Tyraz stated she was happy, but wished her rebel brother, Prince Lorien, would stop trying to conquer the kingdom. At Sorin's suggestion, Lord Sorin, Captain Vekni, Princess Tyraz, Lady Lothston, and Lady Waller raised their glasses and toasted to Vigor. Sorin asked for an audience with the Fury Lords and asked Lady Lothston which Fury Lord she served. Lothston explained that while she served all 3, she hailed from the castle of Sadism, which belonged to Odoacer. Sorin asked what she could tell him about Odoacer. Lothston stated Odoacer was a strong man with powerful magic. She explained there was talk of how Dovah was without a king for the past 10 years. It was said Odoacer was a candidate to become king and marry the princess. Sorin asked Lothston if she could arrange a meeting between himself and Lord Odoacer the next time she saw him. Lady Lothston agreed. When describing Odoacer's red and gold armor, flaming, flying steed, which Lothston said was called Apocalypse, and queer pink gauntlet, Vekni and Sorin became certain that this person was the same one they saw flying overhead on the plains just prior to their encounter with Karaganda. When Vekni mentioned Odoacer must have just battled 1 troops prior to them seeing him, Lady Waller stated she knew Lord Winnegar of 1. She said he was a sleazeball and a man she didn't trust. Vekni said this made sense as 1 and Vigor were in open war with one another. Waller went on and continued she knew Winnegar from before the war. She added Winnegar was once a bounty hunter alongside the man known as King One in Dovah. Waller told a story of how one once worked out of the bounty hunter's hall in the Abandoned. he and Winnegar left Dovah and traveled to Un, where one aided the king and queen in quelling an uprising. The queen took a liking to one and granted him a lordship and lands. Shortly after that, he turned the other lords of Un against the king and queen and took over the country. Lady Waller explained that afterwards he decided to return to Dovah and conquer his homeland. After the conversation, Sorin and Vekni returned to their table to eat. While there, Sorin read Tyraz's note, which was seductive, and requested Sorin meet her in the bathroom. When Vekni looked over to the table of the three women, she scoffed at the princess for sitting calmly and cordially with her kingdom's conquerors. The princess stood and walked away while Vekni looked over at the table. After arguing who would follow the princess into the bathroom, both PCs agreed Sorin would go speak with her. After Sorin left, Vekni walked to the kitchens to speak with Dankar. Vekni asked Dankar where the person was that wanted to speak with her and Sorin. Dankar explained they already spoke to the one that summoned them. Vekni stated no one said anything of importance. Sorin's minor illusion spell wore off, and Vekni reverted to wearing her pirate gear. Dankar seemed disappointed in her staff for allowing an uncouth pirate into her fine establishment wearing poor quality garments. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Sorin met with Princess Tyraz. Her entire demeanor was different, as she appeared fidgety and quite scared. She explained she was a prisoner in the city and desperately wanted her family to regain control of the kingdom. Tyraz explained her brother, Prince Lorien, had a settlement of resistance fighters hidden in the sewers beneath the city. She asked Sorin to help Lorien gain the throne of Dovah. Sorin agreed. Tyraz told Sorin she was dating Triant, a man who ran the sewer system. She explained that Sorin should seek Tyrant out, and he would aid Sorin in finding Prince Lorien within the sewers. Tyraz said he could recognize Triant by the hat he always wore, which was orange. Princess Tyraz added Triant's father, Trifle, once served the former king as his master-at-arms, but now worked in Vigor Valley City as the armorer. Sorin comforted the princess and told her not to worry. He said he and Vekni would help the Lorien family overthrow Vigor. Tyraz explained she currently resided in quarters near the mayor's office, but she was once a prisoner in the castle at the capital of Loriston. Princess Tyraz promised Sorin lands and wealth if he could return her family to power in Dovah. Sorin and the princess parted ways, and Sorin returned to Vekni. Seeing as it was already noon, Sorin paid for their meal, and both adventurers left Dankar's fine dining, heading back to Lorgan's Tavern for the meeting with Nicholas and the Forte assassination squad. On the way back, Sorin told Vekni about his conversation with Princess Tyraz. Vekni realized her plan of uniting Prince Lorien and Clad with Queen Inez and Slay just became much more difficult. Sorin and Vekni arrived back at Lorgan's 10 minutes late, finding Nicholas and his men were nowhere to be seen. Lorgan explained the tiefling assassins were here at 12 sharp. He said Nicholas left in a hurry, but told him to relay a message to the two adventurers, saying he and his men were going off ahead to find the hiding Prince Lorien. Nicholas wanted Vekni and Sorin to follow and join in the hunt. Vekni and Sorin left the tavern and double-timed it towards the sewers.